the charge for the meeting, charge for the work session?
The Milwaukee Board of School Directors will conduct a work session from 5:30 p.m. until 8:00 p.m. on Tuesday, August 23rd of 2022, for the purpose of discussing the MPS strategic plan and the strategic planning process. This work session will be held virtually. However, members of the board may join the work session from the Central Services Building located at 5225 West Baldrige Street in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. As is customary for board work sessions, no public testimony will be taken. The meeting will be broadcast on Time Warner Spectrum Channel 13 and via live stream and on the MPS YouTube stream.
Thank you very much.
That completes the announcement.
Thank you. And so what I was thinking of tonight's meeting is to have the administration present both what's been happening and the future plans, and then have frank discussion, questions, commentary by board members. And I'll keep a few so that we all can share equally if people desire. If that's okay with, is there any objection to that, letting the administration go first and then us having questions and comments?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Before the meeting starts, we will need to take the roll.
Yes, of course. Would you please take the roll, Madam Secretary?
Director Carr?
Here.
Director Garcia?
Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi?
Present.
Director Herndon?
Present.
Director Leonard?
Present.
Director O'Halloran?
Here.
Director Simpson?
Present.
Vice President Taylor? I see her audio
Present.
connecting. Okay, great. And
Yeah,
President
virtually in
Peterson?
attendance.
I'm
President
present.
Peterson?
I am present as well.
We have all 9 board members present.
Great. Thank you very much, board members. I'd like to turn it over to the superintendent and his colleagues. Administration, please present.
President Peterson and members of the board, we are honored tonight to share our progress of where we are with the strategic plan and also the next steps in the process, and to get some feedback on direction and those kinds of things, and so that we can make sure that we move this to a final plan and looking at what we can do around community engagement and making sure that we have that appropriate community engagement around this plan. With that being said, I'm going to ask Dr. Melanie Stewart to walk us through where we are at this point. And Dr. Stewart?
Good evening, Director Peterson, members of the board. It is a pleasure to be here with you this evening. And we're going to have Ben bring up the first presentation. And throughout this presentation, we're not only going to be updating you, but we're going to be seeking your feedback at key points as we go through the process. So if you will recall, we have 5 priorities of success, and this strategic planning process includes looking at our academic progress, looking at culture and climate, how we develop our staff, ensuring fiscal responsibility, and also strengthening our communication and collaboration. This began with a resolution back in October of 2021. It was resolution 2122-008 that was approved by you, that asked for us to come up with a timeline of process and needs posted, get community-wide input, make certain the plan covers a specific time frame, be certain that we include the mission statement, goals, and objectives, include accountability measures and annual performance targets. So we're going to begin with the mission. The mission of Milwaukee Public Schools is a diverse district that welcomes all students and prepares them for success in higher education, post-secondary post-educational opportunities, work, and citizenship. As we shared with you before, we are using the Baldrige framework as our guide so that we have the guidance of experts, a long-standing multi-decades of work that has been done before us to help guide us in the work of quality organizations that are present and have come before us. Tonight, we would also like to share with you some words of support that we have, and the first one will be from Ray Hart from the Council of Great City Schools.
Good day, Milwaukee. I am Ray Hart, the Executive Director of the Council of the Great City Schools based in Washington, D.C. On behalf of our 77 urban member school districts around the country, I want to say congratulations to Milwaukee for embracing the Malcolm Baldrige continuous improvement effort. I, as an engineer, have always valued the continuous improvement process, what it means to our schools and what it means to education. I've also valued the notion of success is a journey, not a destination. And as Milwaukee embarks upon this journey to improve outcomes for students, we want to say that the council is here to support your work, here to support your efforts, both your staff as well as others around the community. As you move forward, we want to say congratulations. And if there's anything that we can do on your behalf to support you, we are here. Thank you. And best of luck as you embrace this new process.
For Ray for sending those kind words. Now I would like to switch to Liz Menzer, who is from the Wisconsin Center for Performance Excellence. Then.
Hi, I'm Liz Menzer, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Center for Performance Excellence. I'm a Master Baldrige Examiner with the National Baldrige Quality Program, and I'm also a former school board member for about 10 years. And maybe that's why I'm so thrilled to be talking with you briefly this evening. The Baldrige framework is really a series of questions gleaned from the management practices of top performing organizations in the country. The criteria asks you to consider what's really important to you. Ask questions about the systems and processes that you have in place. And then how do you know those systems and processes are producing the results that you want them to produce? The how do you know becomes really important. It doesn't have you focus on the great money, but really the vital few, what's really most important. And during an era where I think everyone has ideas about what public education should be doing, this framework helps you focus on what is really most important for the children and the families that you serve, as well as your staff. We're here to support you. We're here to help. It was part of your continuous improvement district planning event a few weeks ago, and left very enthused at the work that you are doing. So wish you all the best and am eager to learn more. Thanks so much.
District, including the data metrics team, myself and Dr. Natalie Collins are on the team. From technology and communications, Chad Meyer and Earl Arms has been part. From senior leadership, Eduardo Galvan. From human resources, Pepper Lamoth and Alexandra Kessner. From finance, Shelley Perkins and Brian Terrell. From academics, Felicia Saffold, Lorena Gainey. From equity and inclusion, Pat Ellis. From operations, Michelle Lensky and Ryan Elbert. And from board governance, Jackie Mann and Nita Farrow. And many thanks to all of our chiefs who have also been part of the work with us. One of the next parts is getting the input from our stakeholders, because that again is a critical component of this entire process. So what's the work been so far? As Liz mentioned, we have begun answering the questions throughout the framework from our perspective from all of the offices across the entire district. And eventually we will add stakeholder feedback. we've been collecting results, and we're going to be sharing one set of results with you tonight throughout the district, and we are beginning to compare to benchmarks that are available. What we also have to do is to see how does this data impact our perspective on the work that we are doing and those strategic things that we look at. So, collaboration across offices and departments have been in place to create the organizational profile. All of the districts, as you see, have at least 2 representatives, and board governance is also present. We are currently meeting twice a month with work assignments in between and additional sessions. This past week, there were small group sessions working on the results that we are presenting tonight, and also for the other 4 categories that we have been working on and developing. So there is work between the monthly meeting, every other month meetings, as well as the special meetings to do that. So where are we going to begin? You are asked tonight to bring your Baldrige profile. And I would ask you to open to page 4, because we're going to have our first input segment from you in just a few minutes. And the organizational profile is how we develop who we are, what we do, how we operate, how we measure results, and we begin to identify gaps and focus on key performance requirements and results. So tonight, what I would like you to do is on page 4 through pages 6 is to find your section that you are most interested in. This could be the organizational environment, which is on page 4. It could be your organizational relationships, which is on page 4, moving over to page 5, or our organizational situation. What we are going to ask you to do is to review just one of those 5 requirement sections. The question that we're going to ask is, as you look at these requirements, what is popping out to you as being most key? That when you read our draft organizational profile and when we are able to send that to you, what are you hoping to see in there? What is reading? What is creating meaning within you that you're going, yes, that is something that we need to look at. So that we do not have dead time, I'm going to let you have some time to look at these and think about what is key. And we are going to record your comments. And Dr. Mann has agreed to poll the board as we go through. So be jotting down what area and what are you seeing that is speaking to you and you're hoping to see in our organizational profile. While you do that, for our listening audience, I'm going to go through the requirements, and this will give you a few minutes to read and to think. If we're looking at our organizational environment, what we look at is our educational program and our service offerings. What as a district do we provide to our students, our communities, our families? What is our mission, vision, values? What's our culture? What's our workforce profile look like? What are our assets? And assets are just not monetary. They could be facilities, equipment, technology, intellectual properties. What kind of regulatory environment does the district have to work within? The next section is about organizational relationships, because as you know, any school district is about relationships. So what is the structure of these relationships? Who are our customers, our students, our customers, our stakeholders? Who are our suppliers, our partners? and our collaborators. The second section of the organizational profile is about our organizational situation. Where are we in the competitive environment that we live in? What's our position? What is our competitive changes that have occurred over time? What is some of our comparative data to our competitors? What is our strategic context? What do we believe are our key strategic challenges and our advantages? And what about performance improvement? Where and how do we want to perform? Dr. Mann, I'm going to turn it over to you so that we can get some feedback from our board of directors.
Great. So I will go in the order that I see the board directors on the screen. So let's start with President Peterson. Do you have any feedback for this area? Let's see. Is that a volume or okay?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I look forward to studying this more. But this is one of the things that I see. What is your workforce profile? What recent changes have you experienced in workforce composition? I think we all know that even though we've had problems in the past, we are in a very competitive and difficult position in terms of having sufficient staff throughout the whole entire organization. I think that thanks to the referendum, we were able to do some work in terms of both attracting and retaining some staff, specifically some of the for arts and music and other, but for the staff generally in terms of some of the improvements we've made, but it has been insufficient. And that to me connects directly to the people we serve. I don't so much like to use the word customers. That seems like a financial relationship. But we are obviously continuing to have a decline in the number of students, which is it goes back and affects our financial capacity to recruit staff. Our decline in terms of our students has to do with everything from the general lessening of the number of students, kids of student age in Milwaukee, to people not, our competitors, taking kids from our family, kids from our community, and convincing their families that they should go to those schools. So those are two things that I think a strategic plan has to address, and they can be addressed in a variety of ways, which I have some ideas, but I don't want to spend too much time talking, so I'll end there.
Okay, Director Carr. Okay, I think Director Carr is muted. Okay, we'll come back. Director Leonard.
This one always pops out for me, and that's when I look at organizational relationship. For me, looking at, you can hear somebody doing organizational leadership in my house right now. It's my dog, sorry. But anyway, but I do look at not just the structure, but really to me, it's how I always feel like how we relate and empower our other stakeholders will determine how our leadership works within those relationships. And I always feel like changing that and making that work at its highest level of efficiency would actually affect all other areas on this profile. And I'll definitely keep it short.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I was taking a look at the organizational situation, so competitive environment. And I have to apologize. I really struggle to listen and write at the same time. So forgive me if some of this seems very high level. So as it pertains to competitive position, speaking about the competitors that we have, I noted that we have a lot of like voucher and charter schools, charter authorizers within the city, open enrollment, rise in homeschooling, a rise in virtual schools that, aren't even, they could be somewhere completely outside of the metro Milwaukee area, and students can enroll in those private schools, and even just the loss. I think, as Director Peterson had noted, that we have a declining under 18 population. So, whether it's a threat of, families just are choosing to have fewer kids, or if the city or even the state of Wisconsin is losing ground to other states. I noted under competitiveness changes, some of the changes that create opportunities for innovation. I think one of my principals told me, we were just kind of spitballing about how has the pandemic changed everything? And she was like, we jumped forward like a decade with our technology within a short amount of time. Like suddenly we have, a one-to-one relationship on some of these Chromebooks and things that maybe we're still like figuring out how to integrate that. But I did note that that could be a possible source for innovation. And then with the data sources, DPI, I know that would be a source for how we can compare ourselves to other districts around us. I think it would be an opportunity if we can get more information, for instance, with declining enrollment, if we can identify where some of the students who were previously enrolled with us have gone to, so that we can understand that sort of situation. And I have some other notes, but I can leave it there. So that would be for P2A.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
Thank you. The two that stood out to me were our competitive advantages and disadvantages, and also the key performance indicators. So we, obviously have some areas of improvement, but we also have some areas of real strength. And I think one that feels really pertinent and pressing right now, as I was talking to Director O'Halloran about some of the, in an environment where we know educators and staff should be paid more, there are some great opportunities with the district, like our benefits. It doesn't make up for the situation currently, but there are some really great benefits of working for the district. And then how can we advance those and make sure we're highlighting all the advantages while also acknowledging the disadvantages? And then secondly, what are the performance metrics we're really focused in on? I think I think all of us have seen a lot of dashboards, and we know there are a lot of metrics to track, but can we really zero in on a few that feel important and really identify how we're moving the needle? So reading, math, and graduation rates. Like what are three things we're going to talk about that really encapsulate how we're moving the district forward? So those are the two things that stuck out to me.
Thank you. Director Herndon.
Here. Yes, for me, I would go first with the organizational structure. I think that for our stakeholders, and for us for that matter, I know for me, it's kind of difficult to figure out what the true organizational structure is. And what I mean by that is from the top down, all the staff in central office, how do they impact outside of that building in terms of the school buildings and working with the staff in the buildings, because they are our stakeholders most of all, the teachers, the students, the parents, and for board directors as well, who's our go-to person when we have issues. And what's even greater is looking at the organizational structure, it doesn't tell me where accountability lies. And what we've experienced is so many issues that crop up at that level, and we don't see accountability. So I'd like to see accountability and somewhere in the organizational structure, so that when there are issues or when there are problems, we know who to go to, where the corrective measures need to occur. And that's simply something that appears to be missing at the present time for me.
Director Simpson.
Thanks. So two things that stood out to me under the organizational environment piece were the program and services offerings, and then the mission, vision, values, and culture. So when I think about our programming, we have so many strengths in that area, that that we can build on, but we also have some weaknesses. And I think that within that idea of programming and what services we're offering our students, one thing that we really have to acknowledge and work on are the disparities and equities that exist across the district, sometimes within the same type of program, but also just from school to school, district to district. So I think that a strategic plan really has to address some of that. The other part with the mission, values, vision, and culture, I really was thinking of that culture and just having, come up through MPS as a student, a parent, a teacher, and now a school board director. I see so many endless positive things happening in schools with our staff. And I think that, and this came up, I know at a board meeting recently, that idea of what we're communicating about our culture is an area that we really need to work on. I know another director talked about it, like telling our own story. I think that that's something our strategic plan needs to really address, so that we're very proactive in terms of our messaging about our culture. Because I think right now, some people, have a lot of different feelings about what that means to them. So I think that that's an area that we can really develop through a strategic plan.
Director Garcia.
Yes, I guess for me, the two items that really stuck out, first being the organizational environment, and I think a lot of the colleagues have referenced a lot of these items, but it's specifically, really having that opportunity to look at what we offer. One of the main things in the organizational environment is really having a clear understanding of our educational programming and service offerings. And I think our way of tying that specifically into how we are centering equity work, when we talk about the role of public schools, the role that Milwaukee Public Schools specifically have, within, the city of Milwaukee and the development of leaders and of, citizens in our city, really looking at how does everything tie to that. I think that, when we talk about the initiative specifically after, the dual pandemics that were, in the heels of, the racism, as well as public health, I think it's really important for us as a board to really acknowledge what those, political forces outside of, the amazing work that we do. There's outside forces that have, a big impact in the way, when we started off, the profile of the organization, it's really about who, what, how, and how we're measuring success. And I think if we really have a commitment, that I think we do, really, how do we bring that to the forefront, every time we talk about measuring success, that it ties back to that issue of centering student needs from an equity lens, first and foremost. And then secondly, I think, when we're analyzing the competitive position of our district compared to other, districts, whether, a couple of my colleagues mentioned, the other school systems, really having an understanding as to the assets that MPS brings, to the conversation. And I can specifically speak about, our focus on bilingual education, our focus on special education. I think that the fact that, again, bringing it back to an equity lens, the fact that we are focusing on, our mission was, we started off with of being able to create the conditions for students to have success, really having a clear understanding as to what role we have, from a competitive standpoint, but mostly from an asset-based perspective that, yes, there's a lot of challenges that we are facing as a district. But I think that there's a lot more strength that we have compared to, our competitors from a programmatic standpoint. So I guess for me, it's more of how can we have a clear understanding, everyone get on the same page around that, so that we can really start building strategies around issues that have to do with, decreased enrollment, that have to do with, you know, equal distribution of resources that we do have, and just bringing it back to that equity piece, I think is going to be really central for how we get this work done.
Thank you. Vice President Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And I don't want to belabor what most of my colleagues said, but I just think about when we think about our mission statement, right? When I think about a mission, I think that's the foundation in which your organization was built. And then the vision is where we want to see ourselves and where we're going. And so when I think about our strategic planning and budgeting, we often say, how does it tie into our mission and vision? But then we got so many other factors to talk about. Like I know Director Garcia talked about the equity in public health, and then we talked about the planning of central office along with school by school nature. And so I often think about, we had a saying that was like one MPS, one goal, right? But there's so many other factors that sometimes I think that one MPS and one goal gets so distorted because at one school you may have certain issues or situations that have to be addressed while another school in the district needs something else. But then at the top level, and everything that comes down seems to be something totally different from everybody. So I often think about also our communication piece, and communication comes up all of this time. How do we as a district continue that mission and vision with that one PS, one goal, while making sure when we talk about equity, it doesn't mean that everybody needs the same thing. It means that everybody gets what they need to ensure that they're successful. So how do we incorporate the reams of equity without saying it's a one box that fixes everything, but that we are giving our students and our educators need individually and in budgeting. That's exactly where my mind goes, to ensure that we don't use equity as a buzzword in inclusiveness, but we actually using it that is going to make a difference in the impact. And then we can be one MPS, one goal.
Okay, thank you. I did receive information from Director Carr, who has an emergency and needs to step away for a moment. Mr. Chair, the conversation is back with the committee. If there are additional comments on this area, we can take those now. Otherwise, we can turn it back over to the administration. Mr. Chair.
Does any other board member want to make an additional comment? Let's turn it back to the administration.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for your insights and for sharing. And Ben, if we can bring up our PowerPoint again. So we looked at the various components that you saw of importance. Soon you're going to be getting a copy of the draft organizational profile. And we ask you, the profile has gotten feedback from every office, most every department. And so it was trying to synthesize all of that feedback into one. And we look forward for you to review it and provide questions and comments. And once we have that and finalized, then we will be posting it to a strategic planning website. Our next activity, data was brought up. Results are critical to the Baldrige framework and process. The team has been reviewing data, reviewing the criteria, and we have built data presentations in all of these areas. Some are not finalized, but tonight we're going to focus, as someone said, we need to have a focus on our math, our reading, our academics, and our graduation. So we are going to be looking at 7-1. The other areas of data results that we have collected are on our customers, our workforce, leadership and governance, and our budgetary, financial, market, and strategy results. So I'm going to go through the 7.1 that is on student data. What I would like you to do, in many of these data slides you have already seen in previous board presentations. There are some new things that you've not seen before, but I would like you to each note 2 to 3 observations that you believe are key to the future of strategic planning. Because as many of you said, it is narrowing our focus to a key set. Key generally means about 3. So what I would like you to do as I present the data, if you would like to interrupt and ask questions, please do so. But what we're going to do is ask you to write your observations and what you believe is most key to our future strategic planning. Ben, if you could switch to our data presentation. Thank you. So this presentation of these 5 priorities, this is really focusing on increasing our academic achievement. Again, we have looked at the Baldrige framework. We have looked at our mission. And these are the questions, and this is page 25, so you can follow along in your framework so that you are able to see the types of questions that we had to look at to find the data that tells the story of our student learning and process results. One of the things to remember is ambitious instruction, accelerating learning. This framework, the formative practices, explicit instruction, engagement, is based on the data that you are going to see and our desire to close gaps and accelerate learning. So here are student outcomes. If you look at this data, this was our early literacy. I'm going to ground you and then go fairly quickly through the slides. This is early literacy pre-pandemic. The arrows indicate growth from fall to spring. Here is our data from this past year. Still seeing growth, but we have some learning loss. Reading, pre-pandemic. Having the data from this past year. Looking at the star reading by race, as you look at this over time, is to look at the performance of various groups by race and ethnicity and to see where things have been the same or where we see growth over time. If we look at reading by disability, the top charts, or the without disabilities, 2 disabilities, or by LAU levels or English language proficiency level below. Looking at math, this is pre-pandemic. This is the past year. Looking at math by race and ethnicity over time. Have there been changes within any particular race or ethnic group? Looking at special ed versus not special ed, and at the bottom, looking at by LAU level. Very soon, we have received our spring of 22 state assessment data, but it is currently embargoed. So we look forward to sharing that with you as soon as it is unembargoed. And as we look at this data that I'm going to share tonight, is remember that this represents for forward about 44% of our students. For ACT Aspire, only about 15% of our students, and ACT about 45%. Remember, this was right when we went back from virtual learning, so not everyone had the opportunity to test. So if we look here by race and ethnicity, here we're looking at our English language arts scores by race and ethnicity. If we are looking at math by race and ethnicity. If we are looking at language arts up in the upper corner for students with disability, the lower corner for math. Looking at forward, just a reminder, that's 3rd through 8th grade, is looking at those students who are English proficient versus those who are English learners. ELA at the top, math at the bottom. Moving over to ACT, here are composite scores on a scale of 1 to 36 by race and ethnicity. Looking at math, again, composite scores. Looking at ACT by special needs and those without, math in the bottom. English learners, language arts at the top, math at the bottom. Here's a data chart you don't always see. These are our access results. And looking at over time, the various colors represent the different levels. You may say, well, I don't see any 6s. 6s are those students have already exited. We exit students at a level 5. So we see that those students that are in the bright blue are the students that exited last year. Actually, this year we have the 21-22 data included in here. Looking at our GT identification, this is data that we shared with you earlier in the year, and looking at the distribution based on our COGAT screener. Looking at those students that were identified as gifted and talented using TOPS over time, and then the total on the far right. Moving on to track to graduation, and as was mentioned tonight, is looking at that graduation rate and making certain all of our students are graduating. If we look first, one of the indicators for graduation is the number of students taking AP exams. This is new data for you. You've seen up through last year, but you can see over the last 3 years during the pandemic and to last year, we have an increase in the number of students taking exams. We also have an increase of the number of exams taken because, of course, I may have taken 1, you took 3. So we see more tests being taken. We see the percentage of students that received a 3 or greater on the AP exams, and we are up from last year. We note 1920, remember that was during the pandemic, much smaller number, but students that were very motivated, were very successful. This is looking at the percentage of AP exams by race and ethnicity over time. This is a chart, and we have de-identified the schools. I will say that as there are several other charts that we have by school. Number one is not the same school in each chart. So we have de-identified them so we can focus on the differences without focusing on specific schools, so that you can see the total number of exams that were taken versus the enrollment in the AP classes, number of students taking AP classes. Remember, some of those are multiples. I took one class, you took 4 classes, so you count as 4. But then the percentage of those students that actually took exams. Looking at the scores by subjects, and you can see the different amounts: English language composition, English literature and composition, very popular for our students to take. The star is for redaction. Those are numbers that were less than 10. Again, some additional courses. You can see that we have high numbers taking government and politics. We have high numbers that are taking the Spanish language and literature, taking psychology tests. This is looking at now the International Baccalaureate test, and this is new data. This includes the 21-22 spring data for our 4 IB schools. What we see also is during 1920 and 2021, very different. Exams were not taken. Scores were done in a different manner. In 21-22, we were back and we exceeded where we were pre-pandemic slightly. So this is good news. One of the indicators that we can monitor, most of those indicators that I just shared, stars 3 times a year, forward ACT, AP, those are once a year. But what can we look at to monitor our progress of students more routinely? And one of those things is grades. So what you're seeing here is last year and this year, and looking at semester 1 and 2, and looking at the grade distribution. One of the things that we are looking at is how many students are not passing, so that we can focus on instruction to prevent that, but also the impact of that. Right now, our graduation rate is not finalized. So what you're seeing is today. What we have to wait for is third Friday count, because we have to determine what our denominator is. What students have left the district, number of students that have maintained in the district, and then we will have a final percentage that is reported to the state in December. We're up slightly so far from last year. The 2 previous years had waivers. We're also seeing we had 75 early graduates that graduated a full year early. This data is very critical. We have the lowest percentage of students unaccounted for. We have 400 students that we're not certain if they are continuing. So we reached out to the schools so that they can find these students. Some of them may have moved, some may have left the state, gone to a different school, but you can note that number's getting smaller and smaller, while more and more students are returning and staying to complete their high school and earn their diploma. This is looking at the 4-year graduation rate by race and ethnicity. At the beginning, students with disabilities, students without. This is new data. One of the things we looked at is in MPS, we we have concerns that we lose a lot of students that don't come to our high schools. What the data has shown us is we have thousands of students who come for the very first time during their high school years back into MPS schools. We also looked at the number of students that are in different schools. So you can see in the chart below where the top number is a 2. This is the number of students that were in 2 different schools during that calendar year. The next column is the number of students that were in 3 schools, 4 and 5. This was fascinating data that a lot of the students that are entering our high schools are English learners. They are immigrant students. They are students coming from all of these various countries. So you can see over time the large number. So that this past year we had 78 students. We averaged 88 international transcripts per year. So of those numbers of students coming, this is the number that are coming from other countries. Looking at some additional high school data, you recall back to those students that did not pass their class, we're looking at the number of credit recovery credits that our students have earned so that they regain the credit so they can graduate. Take a look at the row for English. There's a very high number of students that are taking credit recovery courses. This is Ingenuity courses. Looking at math, a large number. This past year, 398. Looking at social studies, 298. So these are students that are having to retake classes that they missed or that they failed. Again, we have de-identified schools, and again, a reminder, number 1 is not the same across all data charts. But here, this gives you by school the percentage of students that got a U, a D or a U, then by number, so that you can see the magnitude of the number of student grades. That's the 130,202. That's all of the grades that were given for all of the different courses, but looking at the number of failures that students need to make up. Looking at this by course. Again, highlighting some of the courses that you can see have high percentages of failures, and how can we support our staff and our students to increase their success and lower these percentages. If you look at all of these courses, that translates to 13,400 courses that would need potentially credit recovery. If we look at this data, this is from the Council of Great City Schools. This is data that gives us benchmarks. We don't know who the other districts are, but we know that there are other districts that we can compare ourselves to. This is one that we take very seriously, the percentage of our 9th grade students who failed 1 or more courses. Out of the 39, we had more 9th grade failures. Let me say this again. More courses, only one council school out of 39 had more grade failures than we did.
Dr. Mel,
yes.
Can I ask just a question? Are we going to come back? This is a lot. Like I don't even,
yes.
I'm not even sure what 2 things to take out of this right now, because I'm like, whoa. So are we, what, can you just give me a preview of what's next? Are we going to come back and discuss this? Are we,
yes.
What's the plan?
So the plan is to do an overview, and we're nearing the end. So thank you for your tenacity and patience going through all of this. But I think to recall, this is one set of data. what the team has done is looked at 5 different sets of data, and we are finalizing these. These will be posted. These you can continue to look at. I'm hoping to get your initial reactions of what are the 2 to 3 things that are jumping out at you that you think is critical for us to consider in our strategic planning process.
That context is very helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So here's another chart that we are looking at in the percentage of 9th grade students with a B average or better. If we look down, we're number 30. You're looking for the 30 that is circled so that we have far fewer students with a B average than the other council schools. We look at 4-year graduation rate and looking at that the median is 83. You will recall back, we're under 65 right now, and the median reporting is 83. One of the things that we know, this chart, when you look at it later, are students who graduated, and they graduated in 4 years. So they're part of the 4-year cohort. And I believe this is from 2019. But what we want to focus on is what they did above and beyond to make certain they graduated in their 4 years and were 4-year cohort. And we've broken this down by economic disadvantage or not, special ed or not, race and ethnicity. But you can see 14% went to summer school, 46 used credit recovery, again, ingenuity. 4% went the route of GED option 2, and 7% used our competency program to graduate. You look down into the race and ethnicity, you're also going to see a variance of the students or a disparity of students that needed to use credit recovery. Again, every one of these students did graduate on time. Again, we're looking at the number of core courses and electives. Again, the schools are not the same numbers. What we wanted to show here is the variance of courses available. So this is core courses, science, math, social studies, elective courses that are available at the different schools. You can see it ranges from one school having 131 options available for students down to one school that only has 20 options for students. One of the things we want to look at is if students pass their courses, there is ample time to get all of the credits they need, plus have their electives. And as you can see, open means I can choose whatever I want. That gives a student a lot of choice. If I'm at a regular period schedule, still a lot of open opportunities. But if I need credit recovery, a lot of those options go away. So how do we make certain we are helping support our staff and students so that we can accelerate learning in those students' pass? Once they get out, you've seen this data before. This is the rate at which our students are going to post-secondary institutions. This is the same by race and ethnicity. So again, during this presentation, I know this was a lot of data. What are the 2 to 3 observations that jumped out that you say must be part of our strategic planning based on this data set? We're going to drop the PowerPoint and we're heading back to Dr. Mann to get your feedback.
Okay. Based on the screen, it looks like President Peterson, you would be first.
I look forward to seeing this data when in print so I can study it more. I'll just actually raise some things that made me think that we need more attention to. I mean, there was some data on it, but not much, which is I believe that it's really essential that our students in elementary school come out of 5th and 6th grade as readers, people who not only can read, but love to read. Also, students who are good problem solvers in mathematics, obviously knowing their basic facts and procedures and formulas, but also having enthusiasm for math. And I know that we've made some incremental increases in terms of the summer, the fall to January or spring STAR and other measures. But I'd like to dig down even further into what that could mean in terms of improving the success of students in middle school and high school. I often hear from middle school teachers, that the students in high school teachers, that the level of reading and math skills is low, and it's really hard to make up that at a high school level. So that's one thing. And the other thing that wasn't raised, but I also hear from teachers is, the kids who come to school actually are doing pretty well. The kids who are absent a lot aren't. And I'm sure we can get some data that shows that. I mean, it's common sense. But I think that's another issue that I'd like us to think about as we try to improve the overall academic status of our children. I also think, and obviously if kids meet failure at school, they're less likely to attend. So it's all interrelated. Those are two thoughts that I had, the elementary and the absenteeism.
Thank you. Director Leonard?
So I guess I'm going to reiterate what you just said, President Peterson. I think that it's, for me, what just sort of stands out loud is that looking at high school scores and abilities is related to what happens before they ever get to high schools. And to think otherwise would be sort of a mistake. And I don't believe that any of us in here actually would doubt that in any way. So I believe that our, you want to call it a strategy or a tactic, I'm not quite sure how I want to look at that yet, but the goals will set the strategies. And that has to be that before they even get into high school, at a certain level, reading and comprehension and math competency levels have to be there in place. And if not, we almost need to have like some very, very direct interventions before they even get into that first year of high school. Secondly, and I preach on this constantly, class size with greater teacher to student ratio at the younger grades especially will definitely pay benefits. I haven't the slightest doubt about it. So a child in 3rd grade that has very little reading access at home definitely needs more support in that classroom, in that school, and they can't do it when you have 30, 32, 34, 35 students in a classroom at that age level. So I'll leave it at that, I guess. Yeah, just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran?
Thank you. I do want to echo attendance and class size. I think those are two really important data points as it pertains to the 3 data points that jumped out during that fire hose from which we were drinking. I was surprised by the slide that had the number of moves within one school year. I knew that it was frequent. I guess, seeing even 5 school moves within one school year. So any efforts that we can do to stabilize that experience, I think would be really helpful. I was also I found it interesting, slide 51, which was comparing us against other Council of Great City Schools. It was the number of ninth graders that had failed one or more classes, I think, and how we were kind of, last from the bottom. So I always think it's valuable to compare our experience against other districts our size. So we're comparing kind of more apples to apples. And then I did think it was really helpful understanding credit recovery summer school, like how those tools are used in order for our students to make that 4-year graduation mark. And the more I understand kind of what we need to I guess those efforts that need to be amplified and how we can use those tools in order to keep our students on track is really helpful. And I thought that was really interesting. So those are my 3.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi?
Yeah, I have 3 thoughts. The first thought is it would be nice to have, I also have a leader in my house here, Director Leonard, so we're matching on that. To have all of these data sets, as we engage with the community, and I know this is like free, to like have an interface online where we can also have our constituents like rank which data sets they think are most important would be really great. Like an interactive tool that gives the public the opportunity to give feedback the way that we're doing feedback. So my ask is that we build that out as we're going through this process and as we continue to make these decisions. The second thing is I agree with everything that was said. I think 3rd grade reading, we've seen that be a really big indicator. So I'd like to see that in attendance. The other thing I think we could think about is DPI has these early warning systems. And I think we need to be doing some preventative data collection. So they have the dropout early warning system, which predicts a student's risk of dropping out of high school. And I think they're provided in 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And then they have a college and career readiness warning system, which measures, I think, ACT and college enrollment. And I think, again, that's provided from grade 6 to 9. So I think we also need to be thinking about what are the preventative measures we're tracking on if we're not already, I'm assuming we're doing some of that. Dr. Mel, you can correct me. But I do think that those are, we should be thinking in terms of like preventative and then also post-op data measurement systems.
Thank you. Director Simpson?
Thank you. The one thing that I always think about, maybe I'm biased, is that idea of early literacy and how critical that is for our students. So I think lots of effort in that regard. Class size obviously is a huge thing. So just to focus on early literacy, starting with our K-3 kiddos who come to us for a variety of reasons, moving all the way up through 3rd grade, focusing efforts there will alleviate, I think, some of the strain that's placed on our middle school teachers. Also, another thing that stood out was the number of moves that a child goes through, and I know that was focused on high school, but also I know at the elementary level there's a lot of movement. So I think that idea of continuity across the district. I know we have programming differences, which are fabulous and wonderful, and there's no way I want to lose that. But that there is a certain level of continuity as these children, move and go into a new school and have to kind of adjust. I think that that's an important thing to focus on, like culture, academics. What are those things that we know we're going to really see strong in each?
Thank you. Director Garcia?
Yeah, I think that the presentation of this data was very sobering in many ways and forms. I guess for me, just looking at the graduation rates that we have right now, and I know that we're still waiting for some data to be on embargo to have the final determination, but even if we stay at par with, the last year that we had data, we're not even reaching like a 75% rate. So that means that 1 out of 4 students are not graduating in 4 years, right? So when we look at it that way, it's really, what, and I think my colleague spoke about this, just really what are the preventative things that we can do from a perspective of ensuring that is, that we're working against that being our reality, right? I do think that it's good for us to keep these like metrics as to, what, like how many failures, like how many AP courses are being taken. But again, just kind of centering that idea of equity, to be, I don't know, like I guess finding a way to really like more adequately, obviously push the students that are taking AP and IB courses. I think that's phenomenal that we do that, but I think that we really need to do more strategy around those folks that, are struggling to even read at grade level by the time they get to high school. So, I mean, those are the things that are going in my mind from a perspective of, the urgent need that we have in ensuring success of students. And, like I said, we are, seeing a lot of barriers and outside forces that have to do with that, with those results, right? But what can we as a school system really bring on board, partners, going back to one of those like Baldrige indicators, who are the partners that we're bringing on board. I know that I recently, had a conversation with City Year that provided, very targeted tutoring for, students that were at the struggling of content. And I know that this year, for example, like we have less number of city years and less number of our schools, right? So what are we, like, how are we supplementing that, considering that there is a need? What are the partners that we're bringing on board to ensure that, all hands are really on deck from a relational perspective, because we're seeing that there's a shortage all around from a workforce standpoint, but our students are really feeling the brunt of this. And ultimately, I think a lot of my colleagues have been talking about, what does support look like for the students as well as a staffing perspective. So all of that tied in, and that's kind of what stood out for me from this presentation.
Director Herndon.
Thank you. For me, first and foremost, that stands out to me and has been something that I think about all the time is the insecurity and instability in the families is very, very large. And that being the case, if we don't have consistency, which one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, for the lower grades, most especially when it comes to reading and
Uh-oh. It looks like Director Herndon, it looks like your computer froze. So I don't know if you can repeat that.
I'm going to switch to my home net. All right, we should be good now.
Okay.
Hotspot isn't the greatest thing. Okay, what I was saying that we needed the continuity for our students, acknowledging the fact that they are so mobile and not only do their families move a lot, but the families change schools a lot. So that's number one. I feel to accomplish that, we need to do some type of assessment or survey with our teachers in grade K through 3. Because I was looking at statistics on a couple of the AGR schools the other day, and it was amazing to look at that and see that the students at kindergarten level scored far higher in reading, for example, than they did by the time they got to the 3rd grade. It just dropped. And I, for one, don't know the answer as to why that occurred. But then we should have some type of way to assess the kids' and do some type of intensive instruction prior to them completing third grade and going to fourth. Because if they don't have the good reading foundation at the early grade levels, they certainly are going to, their academic performance is going to be far less as they move through the district. The other thing for me was educating the stakeholders, meaning the parents and the community at large, because what I find in talking to people in the community, and I even had a long conversation earlier today with someone, they have no idea of the fact that the schools, we have this hodgepodge of schools, and the parents have no idea of identifying one from another, and I mean between vouchers and charters and Milwaukee Public Schools. That's number one. Within Milwaukee Public Schools, the next thing is they don't understand the class offering. Therefore, they may put a kid in say, French immersion, for example, and then leave the kid there past third Friday, perhaps. And the next thing you know, the child is being removed because that didn't work for the family for whatever reason. I think we absolutely have to look at educating the community as to what our offerings are, and the fact that that's a discussion that needs to be had early on and through every segment, K through 6 or K through 8, and then going into the high schools. When it comes to the high schools, what I find is horrible attendance. The other thing, I was involved with some students over this year in high school, or over the past couple of years actually, and what I found was that a teacher had made the mistake of saying a D was a passing grade. So no matter what anybody told these kids, as long as they got a D, they were good. That's a bad thing to have happened, because then after 2 or 3 years, now they're finally realizing, oh, that wasn't so cool. The other thing is these kids are not really going to school. There again, we got to get back to the parents and the community at large, because the parents throw up their hands and say, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, somebody has to do something. Somebody has to be responsible. So I think educating the parents on the do's and don'ts and what the penalties are, or what services that may be available either for the family outside of the school or within the schools, what do we offer? But we've got to come up with something to address these issues from the bottom up, because they're major. And then there's instances that I've been informed of where a student gets to what should be 12th grade, and the parent is never aware, for whatever reason, they weren't that involved in the student's high school career. And the student gets to what should be 12th grade, and they've got 9th grade credit. And then that's a major problem for both the student and the family. So I think communication is huge as it relates to those things. And then for us, the reading and mathematics proficiency, I think it's all hands on deck in K through 3, and communicating with the teaching staff to try to get some kind of stats on what teaching methodologies work best. That's it for me.
Thank you. Vice President Taylor. We may have lost her. I know she was on dial-in. President Peterson, that completes the go-around for this area. You can ask board members if they have more comments, or turn the segment over to the administration.
I'll make one comment, and then other people can as well. Some of the things that we've been suggesting, I mean, I know, like intensive reading intervention at the elementary grade. We used to have reading intervention teachers. I know for a while, we had a $10 million grant to put a math leader in each of the elementary schools, and there was a real sizable, notable, significant increase in student achievement. but that was a program that lasted several years and unfortunately was stopped. When we look at the issue of intervention, of getting intense intervention at the high school level, obviously that also relates to our ability to have the funds to hire those teachers, to say nothing about finding them, and the the class size issue that was raised by a couple of our board members obviously has a funding cost as well. Again, the one program, the SAGE program, historically that lowered class sizes from 15 students per one teacher in K-5 through third grade was a statewide program that ultimately was diminished. It still it transformed, but because it didn't ever keep up with inflation in terms of what the amount of money given to schools, it was impossible to maintain that 15-to-1 ratio. I'm saying those, just listing a couple of those things to note that there is a financial, I think we have to do whatever we can do with the resources we have, don't get me wrong, and I think we can, one of our tasks is to target our resources that we do have in the best way possible. But it's also to keep in mind that we are with an inherent inequitable funding system that we face, and that's just reminds us all that we have to see to some political tasks as well. So any other comments? I didn't mean to go too long on that, but it made me, I wanted to remind people that that is always on the docket. That's Director O'Halloran.
This is just a question and we can take it offline. I was just curious, there was slide 35 had the percentage of students who take an AP class but don't take the test. And I would love to hear more about that. Like, I understand we have a whole nother probably 4 hours worth of discussion tonight, so I don't want to take up time. So if I can just like get a one-on-one sometime to understand like how we can support those students, because if they're doing all of the work for the year, I want them to get all the credit for it in the test if we can. So happy to take that conversation offline though.
Any other comment? Okay, administration.
Thank you, Director Peterson, members of the board. A few things. I'll answer Director O'Halloran's question right now. Looking at the AP percentages, that's one of the things that the district does, is that students that are economically disadvantaged, there's no fee. Schools pick up a portion of the fees, but the district picks up the vast majority of the fees. So this is about encouraging students to participate not only in the course, but in the exam as well. And I would like to now turn it over to our Chief Academic Officer, Jennifer Mims-Howell, and she's going to share a few things about things that were brought up, and then I'll answer some other data questions. Jennifer.
Thank you, Dr. Mill. Jennifer Mims-Howell, Chief Academic Officer. President Peterson and members of the board, to talk about some of the things that we showed you tonight when we're looking at the academic data. A couple of the things is, as we look at ambitious instruction with our core focus being on reading and writing, as well as mathematics, our goal is to take a deeper dive. While interventions are important to help kids get caught up, as we continue to use the high quality learning materials that we've invested in, we're hoping that as we teach kids at grade level, the interventions that we use will be, in some respects, supplemental to the courses that are being taught. It's a way to help the students continue to achieve. All our teachers, we're working very hard with our professional development, our professional learning strategies, going deeper, know it, teach it, measure it, so that all students have an opportunity to reach the threshold, I would say, of like, if I'm in third grade, I'm working in third grade. Even though my test scores may say I'm still at second grade, there has to be something that's going to pull me towards third grade. And while I'm being pulled, what's the support that's pushing me and behind me? So we want to look at that too. The comment about our kindergarten students, and then looking at what our third grade scores are, we do have data to look at that as well. What we've been doing is really focusing on, okay, where is the student when they come in kindergarten, and where we can take them to for first, building on that for second, and then for third. So we are looking at that. The other piece is our early learning, early warning signs. We do have some We do use that system that DPI has out there, and some of the data you looked at tonight was because we do use that system. We are looking to take our students from where they are to where we know they can go. Again, grade level standards, using the Common Core state standards, as well as, again, high quality instruction. And then finally, I think before I let Dr. Meltop speak again, in looking at the data that we have for our attenders and non-attenders, I think one of the myths is that if I don't come to school, I'm not going to learn. We do have some students that did very, very well during virtual times and can just, pick the book up, read it, take the test, and do well. Come to school once or twice to get the information. So we have some information on what grades look like for those who attend and those who don't attend. But please know that we are really trying very hard to, again, meet students where they are and then take the data that we are learning from the students to focus on the early literacy, to increase our graduation rates, to increase attendance, as we also look at, excuse me, the types of courses that are taken. Director O'Halloran asked a question about, taking the AP class and then taking the exam. We know we need to put some tutoring and some additional supports in there and some encouragement for students to go through and take those exams as well. And then finally, looking at our cultural relevance and then our equability and who's being offered certain courses is something that we've been working on with our English language learners, our special education students, along with our counselors and transition coordinators, so that students who meet the criteria, no matter what their race, ethnicity, or gender, are offered those opportunities. Dr. Mel?
Hold on a second. President Peterson and members of the board, one of the things that we are doing with this strategic plan process, it gives us an opportunity to look at all of the different avenues that we have before us, looking at how we can build in safety nets to support students as they go forward. President Peterson talked about math teachers early on, that program that we had some years ago that was very successful. Absolutely. The other piece is the reading piece he mentioned. We had reading resource teachers in every single school that could do those pullouts, do that individualized instruction to get students ready, to get them reintroduced back into the learning environment. That is something that we did with the additional dollars from the governor this year, is to set in place that staff to be able to do that at the early childhood, early learning area, so that we could move that piece forward. However, right now where we are with a crisis with teaching staff, so looking at how do you build those safety nets around, a lot of those things are in the works and working through those kinds of things. But this opportunity gives us a close upfront look at what we need to do to build those safety nets and what is the things that we are going to fund as a district to make sure that those things are picked up. Dr. Mayo.
Thank you, Director Peterson, members of the board. I want to talk about a question that Director Gokul Gandhi asked about early warning systems, and yes, we've got them. The state has some. Ours is, we developed it some years ago based on the ABC. So you have attendance, behavior, and core curricular type things. So performance. It's around here, it's called Principal's Landing Page. And we used to have it in one format, and now it is integrated into our data dashboard so that principals and assistant principals have access and they can monitor on a daily basis the key components. Two other components that are in the principal's landing page are staff attendance, because there was some concern at one point. That was a myth that was that data turned around, because there was a lot of folks that said staff is absent all the time. Well, we found out that that was not true. And we now can monitor the attendance of staff and how many times they're out of the building for other pertinent things. Also, there's a portion of the principal's landing page that principals can monitor budget, part of the budget that they can control. So again, looking at attendance, looking at behavior, and looking at performance. At the high school, that could be grades and GPA. For the elementary, that could be their STAR scores that they are looking at. And you're right, DPI also has some things, but some of their data is a little bit more lagging, but it's still another piece of data that is at our disposal. So thank you very, very much for your feedback and your observations.
I have a question. Can you tell us, like from your perspective, if you had to pick 2 or 3 pieces of data today to include in the strategic plan, what in your expertise of, working with it day in and day out, would you choose to include in the plan?
Administration.
Director Peterson, Director Gogol-Gandhi, members of the committee, I think the key things for me are the academics performance, is to make certain, and this is what ambitious instruction is all about, is that we are teaching at grade level and making certain that students, we're scaffolding them where they're at to where they need to be through tier 1 and high quality instructional materials, and keep that moving so that every student is moving a full grade level every year. The other is closing the gap on graduation so that we increase the 4-year graduation rate of all of our students. Those to me are the 2 big areas where we need to focus.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by board members? I don't know if it's premature in terms of my question, but I know as board members talking, I was very aware that I'm sure a number of teachers would have some similar perspectives and probably some other perspectives. And I know we're planning on reaching out to other stakeholders, but is this the time to talk about that, or just, I see Director Herndon has her hand up, but if the administration wants to respond to my question, then we can go back to Director Herndon.
Peterson, you are looking ahead 2 slides into our next activity. So we'll be able to, we're heading exactly that direction. So we'll let Director Herndon share her comments first.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Director Herndon.
I simply have a question that I had forgotten earlier, and maybe you have it on a later slide, and that is dealing with behaviors that impact the school day for all in many of the buildings. Do you have any plans to address that issue in a manner different than what currently happens?
Director Peterson, Director Herndon, members of the committee, we just looked at the data on 7.1. That actually is part of 7.2 when we're looking at our students, their satisfaction, looking at the systems in place. So yes, we have data. It was not in this particular presentation.
I'm sure we look forward to that. Any other questions or comments by board members? Seeing none, let's turn it back to the administration.
Very good. Thank you very much. So, as we have taken down your observations that are key to strategic planning, one of the things that Director Peterson brought up is gathering feedback. So in tonight's materials, there is a Word document, a PDF document that gives some dates and where we're moving forward so that you have some kind of itinerary of the strategic planning process. At the very high level, we're finishing our organizational profile, and when that's ready to share and get your feedback, we'll be sending that to you. Fall will be survey development, winter to spring, surveys and community engagement sessions, and then with a final presentation in June of 2023, the findings and the recommended action plans to the board. So one of the things that we are doing is we're searching to have a little support for strategic planning firm that can assist us engaging the community in this process. Milwaukee is a large area and we have many people that we need to get their feedback, and so we're going to be looking for some support in that area. We'll be reporting back to you in October with some possible firms. So now is your opportunity, our next activity, is as you have thought about the criteria, you've looked at least one set of data, we have identified 4 key groups, and this aligns to the Baldrige framework, that we need to ask questions of: our staff, our families, our students, and the community at large. So what I would like you to do is to think about what are 2 to 3 questions you would like to ask each group. And I'm going to go back to Jackie Mann, that we can either just do a round with staff, a round with family, students, and community, but she's going to poll you and we are going to be recording your ideas for questions.
Dr. Mill, as board members are thinking about the different areas, are you able to give some examples or more information about maybe what other school districts might look for, or any survey data, or any information on the areas that you would have as board members think about them?
And if I can just also say, I think when we do get to board member feedback, I think we should stick to like first staff and not do all 4 by each of us. I think it would be more productive if we focused on the 4 categories separately. But administration, do you want to?
President Peterson and members of the board, one of the things that we have been doing is gathering questions, survey questions from the Council of Great City Schools, from various schools in the council, out of the 77 member council, looking at what we can do. One of the ones that we just had in hands, reviewed here recently, was from Jackson, Mississippi, looking at some of the same questions that they're asking. So we're not reinventing the wheel, that have used the same model to ask those type of questions, and no questions we have seen is really off limits, but we want to make sure that we're asking questions that is going to add value to the organization, and to making sure that the strategic plan move in the direction of supporting academic success for children, and also to provide improvement for the district. So looking at it from that perspective. So we have a number of questions from that survey that we could put out there. However, we can put and post a couple of those samples out there for the board to take a closer look at, to really redefine, because we got time that you could push those questions to us. So we want to be informative as much as possible from all of those 4 segments that we just took a look at. Anything else, Dr. Mann?
Yes, I would add Director Peterson, members of the committee, Dr. Mann. As a result of working with the council, what we found and what I found is that there are a lot of districts, several districts, that are right where we're at. They're in the process. We are moving out of the pandemic and we're moving into a new level of strategic planning to move forward. They have actually created a strategic planning group that will begin meeting so that we can work together and share what's working, what's not working, questions, etc. So because of asking, now there's actually going to be a work group, and that should be beginning in just a couple of weeks. And yes, I will be a member of that. So.
Okay, so at this point, if we could have the slide displaying, so that board members can think about the questions and provide feedback. So in thinking about the criteria, the first area is staffing. So on staff, President Peterson.
Yeah, I originally wrote down, asking the staff how to improve reading, writing, and math instruction at the early grade. And then I thought, well, obviously that really shouldn't be asked of the high school teachers, and vice versa, obviously. So that we have to figure that out. I'll let that go. I also think I come back to attendance in high school, and that's a question I would ask high school teachers in terms of how they might improve attendance. And then I think we might want to also slice it in another way, which is how might we do this, assuming we don't have a large increase in resources, and how might we, and what would it look like if we did have increased resources? I say that because we have to do both. We have to plan for the worst and fight for the best. And I think we should. It would not benefit if all the response from the staff was, well, we need more teacher. I mean, I agree with what I'm about to say. We need, more resources for teachers, reading intervention, da 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 da. But we also don't want that to be the be all and end all of a strategic plan, because we have to be realistic and at the same time political in other areas so that we can move forward and get more resources. Anyway, those are just thoughts and some complications that I had in terms of about surveying staff. But I really look forward to hearing from staff. I assume organizations will speak up, whether or not with teachers, the union, and that I look forward to those kind of interactions and feedback as well.
Thank you. Director Leonard?
Okay. This is for staff, right? I'm sorry. I'm like deep in thought here with questions.
Yes, this one is for staff.
So I guess I just, if I were a staff member, and I kind of still feel like I am, I guess I would want to be asked, what is the most needed act of assistance, not a resource per se, but an act of assistance to make you successful in your classroom? That would be a question I would like to be asked. That would be more wide ranging for them. It would be something that, because some teachers look at resources and say, I don't need a ton of resources. What I need is, extra 15 minutes to work on this after work or whatever. There could be a myriad of answers, but anyway, that would be my question.
Okay. And then we have Director O'Halloran.
I likewise was interested in hearing more like how to improve morale, recognizing that there are some things that are within our control and some things are outside of our control. So what do we have the power to change right now? I would also be interested in knowing by years of service. So is it like, are we noticing trends within people who are just starting with MPS versus middle? And I would be curious, I know we're talking strategic plan, but if we're going to be asking, I'd like to know how many people have thought about leaving their career. Like, are they because they want to change their career because they think they want to go to a different district? And this is not just as it pertains to education. I want to know about secretaries and engineers. And, I would be curious to hear that input from everybody. Employee morale, like.
Thank you. Director Garcia?
Yes. So for staff, I guess my three questions would be, first of all, getting an understanding of what is keeping them here. So some data around just out of all the million things that you can be devoting your life to, why do you choose, to be with us? Second would be to, piggyback off of Director Leonard. What support do you feel you need to, and I think on the Baldrige framework, they framed it in to prepare and recover. I think that that's a really good way to frame the couple, years that we've had within, just change, right? Of all of these forces that teachers are now teaching in, that students are learning through. And then the third one would be what alignment do you think needs to still happen that is critical for the sustainability of our district?
Thank you. Director Simpson?
Thanks. Yeah, I also, a million questions. So I think one though, I agree with Director Garcia, sort of like what makes you stay in MPS, to find out like what are the things that make our staff want to stay and keep working would be really important to hear. And some way of getting to that, and I think Director Leonard was, kind of got to this, like, what's that critical need that you have in your classroom that would improve, the learning, academics or the learning conditions, but what's sort of a critical need that you have for the classroom that would improve things for you? And your ability to like teach and students to be successful.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi?
I agree with everything that's been asked, and then I'll just reiterate that anything that we're asked, I hope that we're asking all 4 of these constituencies the same thing. So again, just advocating again that we build an interface on our website that is able to collect data on the same questions we're being asked, so that we can collect some standardized responses and see where our constituency is on all of these topics.
Thank you. Director Herndon?
Yes, mine has 3 parts to it. The question being, does student behavior impact your classroom? How and what can we do to assist you to improve?
Okay. Make sure I have everyone. I can't tell if Vice President Taylor is on. Doesn't look like she's been reconnected yet. So President Peterson, you could actually do another round on this area, or we could move to the next area, which is families.
I would, I'll ask if anybody has anything else to say about staff at this point, but I'd like to move to families and students and community, because it will take us some time, I think, to get through those 3. And I actually don't know how much more we have left. So let's start with family.
Okay. President Peterson, if you could go first with families.
Yeah, well, I think one good question would be sort of mirroring what was some people suggested that we ask the teachers is, why do you continue to send your kids to MPS, or what had made you decide to send your kids to MPS, or maybe given the confusion that people have as to what schools and what is MPS, it could be the specific school. I don't know. I think a key thing is what would be the one thing, again, what would be the one thing that you would ask of your school to improve in terms of to change, so that you would feel even more positive about your school. I mean, I think one thing I heard in the beginning from one of our board members is that some parents at the very end, the kids are in 12th grade and they think everything is fine, but they haven't been listening or haven't been communicated with that in fact the kids are behind and have been for a couple years. But the same kind of concerns should be that of the elementary school students as well, in terms of if this, how can we improve communication between the school and between the classroom teachers. And I think there is a difference if we ask it just about the classroom they're in, or also their school. So there might be that 2 different kinds of answers might emerge, and that's something we should think about as we draft such questions. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Director Leonard?
Okay, so I won't repeat all things that Bob said because that's sort of what I would be saying, asking also. But I also was looking at it as a full service community type school. And I was thinking of one question would be, what needed services would you like to see being offered by your student school?
Okay, thank you. Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I had written down, why did you choose us? What's your pain point that, we should be working on resolving? I've fielded many questions around the enrollment process, and we have had some internal dialogue about that, and I appreciate that. But, how, from a user experience standpoint, a customer experience, how can we improve? And then not like as a systems question, but to the point around what's one thing you would like to see at your child's school that isn't there now? So for me, like with the dependence on like it may sound silly, but like it's volunteer coaches. So we don't have like robust athletics. And that would be one thing that I would love to see at my kids' school. So sometimes that doesn't like bubble up to the board level. And I'm not sure that there's a policy that we can put in place, but knowing kind of some of these things that aren't necessarily red flags is also something that we should be focused on improving that experience for our families, even if it's not like an emergency dire situation.
Thank you. Director Garcia?
Yes, I guess for families, I would also ask the questions that I proposed for staff. So, why are you enrolling your students here? What keeps you here? What support do you feel is critical to prepare your student for success? And I would just kind of alter the third question. And I guess this is more getting into like the user experience, but as well as our ability to connect their mission and vision, to our families. I guess I'm interested in knowing, when do you feel the most connected to MPS?
Thank you. Director Simpson?
Yeah, just what would improve what 2 to 3 things would improve your experience as an MPS family?
Thank you. And Director Gokul.
That was my exact question, Director Simpson. Well, you stole my very unique, brilliant thought, but I guess that just speaks to your brilliance. So thank you for asking.
Two minds, it's like.
Okay, President Peterson. So that completes the round on families, and you can ask board members if they have more questions, or we can go on to students.
Any other thoughts on families?
I didn't get mine in.
Oh, I'm sorry, Director Herndon.
Okay. I have several, and I'll just stick with probably one, and that, or two maybe. Do you think your child is achieving at grade level in math and reading? The other one is, what can we do to provide more opportunities for you to participate at the school or with your child at school? And that's it.
Or maybe
because we know that there's, in many schools, almost zero parental participation. So my thing is, we definitely need them. So what can we do to help that happen?
I'll just mention that when someone said the question about what other services might be provided at your school. I would assume that many families don't know that we have a dozen community schools that provide those services, and then are other schools that provide some of those services. So part of it is educating parents that that's even a possibility.
Yes.
Question, so any other comments on families? Dr. O'Halloran.
I guess I just want to, so maybe my initial question was a little too nuts and bolts because I'm trying to think strategically rather than just like individual one-offs. I would be curious to know what our families want for their students. For some families, like they want their kids to go to college. Some families want their kids to have a successful career. And I would be interested to know what they want, to hear that from them, and to know if they think that they're getting that from their school.
Thank you. Any other thought?
I'd like to ask something of administration along these lines, which is, as I stated earlier, our community isn't aware of the offerings in our schools, which is varied. How do we put that information out so that parents understand that if your student is interested in going to college to be an engineer, you would not necessarily send that student to Vincent to the agriculture program? That is a big problem that causes a lot of the school surfing that goes on.
Administration, do you want to respond at all to that?
President Peterson and members of the board, we have the academic career plan that we do with our young people to know exactly which direction they want to travel. We kind of talked about that sometime with the board in regards of what that looked like, and families can work along with their young person to make those decisions of the type of school that they want to attend and how they want to go about doing that. We have the directions guide, what lays out exactly what is happening with in all of our schools, what we offer and what grade levels and those kinds of things, and any of the prerequisites that is needed for that particular school is another opportunity. And then we have all of the various enrollment fairs. We have the kindergarten enrollment fair. We have an enrollment fair that's coming up in September for 8th grade students who's going to be transitioning into high school, sharing with all the options that we have within the city. And then on that Saturday, they will make a decision with their parent of what that offering would be. So those are some of the things that we are doing, that we have in place. And if there's any other thing that anyone can share with us, we will be more than happy to move in that direction. But those are three that I think of right off the bat. Dr. Mail, anything that you want to add?
Director Peterson, members of the committee, as Dr. Posley laid out some of the activities that the 8th graders are going to do in their decision making for high school. Another is every school has a video that is going to be posted on the website, and students are going to be encouraged to go and tour with their families online. And so we're just increasing the visibility of all our schools and all of the programs that are available to us. And so that will include helping our staff know, our schools know, so that we can support students.
And I can't, President Peterson, members of the board, cannot forget about our kindergarten enrollment fairs that we have to make sure that families know the kindergarten offerings we have, whether it's the type of programs, whether it's Montessori, whether it's bilingual, whether it's immersion, whether it's the arts, just those opportunities for families to explore. And that is done on a virtual standpoint as well as an in-person standpoint to make sure that we are moving that forward. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move to students. And I'm going to ask.
I have a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I'm going to be annoying and ask administration again. You guys do a lot of surveys. Many of you have worked here for many years and seen many iterations of surveys. What do you think we aren't asking families that you would like to see us ask?
Administration.
Thanks for laughing, Dr. Mel. I appreciate it.
Director Gandhi, I think one of the things that Director Herndon brought up about that's data that we've been looking at about student voice and things like that is looking at the comparative. Do you believe that you are, getting the, a third grade education and things like that? I think those are some of the family questions to ask, but I'm certain there are others. And I don't know if Dr. Posley or my colleagues. I forgot to introduce and acknowledge John Hill is busily typing and supporting us tonight so that we can capture your thoughts.
Chair President Peterson and members of the board, that the questions that we have heard from you tonight is in line with some of the questions that we have seen with the survey from various cities. The key thing is how do we boil all of these questions down so that it's not just a volume of questions that are out there. And that is the process that we're looking at to see how do you make that happen. It's always enough questions, because now how do we take some of what each of you have said and blend into one question or 5 questions? We can't do 20, 30 different questions, on one thing. We have to make sure. So those kinds of things now is to try to narrow the focus and narrow it down to cover everything that you have. Just like the piece that Dr. Mel have been sharing with our profile. Our profile right now is 16 pages, and we want to boil that down to 6 pages. So it's all those kinds of things. So that's what we will go through, that same process here with the questioning, and then come back to you and say, this is what has been boiled down to. What are your thoughts?
Can I insert?
Dr. Gandhi.
What would also be great is if on our interface that we're going to build for the strategic plan, maybe we put all the questions and have our families and students and community rank those questions so that we're giving them the option of how they would like their voice represented. And I'll just keep saying it for everyone. I'll just have a little tape recorder so that you know what I'm saying. But I do think it would be helpful, because I think, we sit around and we're in this work every day, like just in a little bubble. And I think sometimes it's good to give people the option to see how they want to be represented. So I do think, as inclusive as we can make this process and as participatory as we can make this process, that would be beneficial to us in the long run.
Any other comments on families? We can move to students then.
Okay, great. We will start with Director Garcia.
Go ahead, Dr. Garcia.
Yeah, so for me, again, the same question. So what keeps you a student in our district? Secondly, what support? And for that one, I guess, I'm just interested in knowing how well supported do they feel specifically in their goals and dreams. I don't know if that's too mushy, but I really feel that's important to get into the more altruistic components of students and their leadership development. And then the third one is what would you like to see for your continued development as a student and leader?
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
I would like to know what about school brings them joy. That's, I think, that's my primary question. And again, maybe we give them a list of questions that they can choose from on the interface we're going to build. That's all.
Thank you. Director Herndon.
My question would be, what academic programming would you wish to have at your school? That's taken into consideration that in terms of, I would say probably the majority of the schools, we have so many specialty schools now, and definitely in high school. I see that may be worthwhile. They may have chosen one that they didn't like, or maybe they're in a school that is under-resourced in some way, shape, or form. So that would be my one question for students.
Thank you. Director Leonard.
I was looking at this more personally. I remember working with middle school students, and I'm just repeating something that we did with them, but was extremely effective, to be honest with you. And it would be even better more with high school students because they'd have more years to pull from, more experiences to pull from. But when you look back at your educational experiences or your school years, what worked best for you? What was your best experience? And what actually hurt you? What caused damage? So it'll be more personal, but it may give us a little bit of a narrative perspective on how they see their experiences, and we can sort of group those or get a better perspective on what our students are experiencing, which would work and which doesn't work. Beyond that, I don't know. I would agree with everybody else. Asking them what kind of programming works best for them, and as simple as, did NPS do anything to improve your possibilities of having us help you make your dreams come true? Something like that. But that'd be good enough.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran.
I'm just going to hold my questions. I think everybody has asked some really great ones.
Thank you. Director Simpson.
What 2 to 3 things would help you enjoy and be successful, enjoy school and be successful at school? Or enjoy and be successful at school? Some variation of that.
Thank you. And President Peterson.
Another way of putting that is what would be 1 or 2 changes you'd suggest to improve learning in your school? But I like the joyfulness. I think schools should be happy places. And any other suggestions for students? Did we miss anybody on the board? Well, let's roll right into community.
Okay.
You can ask somebody else to start that as well.
Yes. Director Garcia.
I guess for community, the same type of 3 questions. So why do you continue to be involved with Milwaukee Public Schools? Let's see. And second one is, how do you feel you support our mission and vision? I think that's critical, as we think about the partnerships that come on board, that it's really them aligning to our goals and our mission. I think those type of partnerships are more successful and help us achieve more. And then the third one is, what role do you see yourself playing in the alignment of MPS strategic plan?
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
A general thing I just thought about too, if we could do some sort of like issue area ranking for all of the participants. So like, food, safety, academic, athletic, just like have a list and ask them to rank like what is your biggest priority in terms of like your school experience. That would be a good universal question to ask. And in terms of the community, I think asking them, what does a strong, supported public school system look like to you?
Okay. Thank you. Director Herndon.
Okay. I have two. The first one is, how can we improve upon negative opinions of our district? I know it's kind of like opening Pandora's box, and how can we improve it? That's it.
Thank you. Director Leonard.
Students.
And we are on community.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know
That's
what?
okay.
I'm not. I guess this has actually been repeated a few times in different ways. How can we help your organizations be more effective partners with MPS schools?
Thank you. Director O'Halloran.
I'm always curious to know from employers what skills they think we should be preparing students with. So how we can help our students be, graduating, ready to take on college or career. So I would be curious from the community standpoint what the community thinks MPS has gaps on as it pertains to future readiness.
Thank you. Director Simpson.
So I had something similar actually to what Director Gokul said, but I also think, what role do you believe our students play in our communities?
Thank you. And President Peterson.
Yeah, I appreciate all the questions that have been asked. I'm thinking of some specific stakeholders that probably will look at this and be fairly critical of MPS, as you can imagine. That's fine. We want to hear them too. But I think we want to stress how can we build ties with your organization, business, faith-based group, or whatever, with our schools to ensure that the students in Milwaukee can receive the best education possible. So to try to stress the positive of relationship building with individuals in the community. I would also say that, like I said, with the families, I would guess that a number of people that aren't familiar with some of the great programs that we have going on, and not only in elementary school, but high schools, obviously, in terms of work apprentice type programs and et cetera, et cetera. Anything else on the community front? Well, let's go back to the.
You have Director Herndon in the queue.
Oh, thank you, Director Herndon.
I'd just like to say, as I'm brainstorming about your last statement, and I had made it earlier too, about the fact that the community simply doesn't understand the structure and the offerings in our school. And in that we're building or rebuilding our communications department, we need to look at a way of reaching out outside of our current portal structure, if you will. Maybe it's ticker tapes on TV or something where each school is showcased over a period of time, especially in the summer and mid-year when some kids are graduating and then school sign-ups are occurring at the same time, where we just simply showcase maybe 2 or 3 schools a week or something of that nature, or more, probably several different ways, maybe radio. If you want if you want your child to be proficient in foreign languages, for example, here's the school that you may want to consider. That type of thing is just, I think we have to kind of think outside of the box as it relates to informing the community on what the district offers, because the community simply does not know.
Thank you. So I'll go back to administration. I know we have a few minutes left. What would you like to share with us to help us
Very
wrap up?
good. So in our 7 minutes that are left, I want one more round. What our team does when we meet is we look at our strengths and our opportunities for improvement. And we focused a lot on the second tonight. I'd like a round robin of 2 strengths that we want everyone to know about MPS.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
structure-wise, I'm not sure we can complete that in 7 minutes. And we have an obligation to be off air. So if we don't get through them, is it possible to have board members to submit to the Office of Board Governance to share with the administration the strengths and opportunities as outlined in the PowerPoint presentation?
Administration.
To one strength, one word, and just bullet it around. 1 word,
Okay.
2 words, max on the answer.
But we also welcome any
Any other.
opportunities, any strengths that you have, get them to us. Even
Yes.
if you're able to do it now or later, we need that.
Okay, we can start with Director Garcia.
Our variety of educational programs and our connectedness to families.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
I would say support.
Okay. And Director Herndon.
Committed staff, committed and caring staff.
Thank you. Director Leonard.
Our extensive diversity at our schools and how well our staff and leadership has worked with that level of diversity.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran.
Programs and diversity.
Director Simpson.
Staff and diversity.
And President Peterson.
Great educators, diversity. You want to learn 2 languages. If you want your child to learn 2 languages, come to MPS. Or strengthens having, if yours is your student, is your child have special needs, we're prepared to work with you on that.
Thank you. We are now back with the administration.
Good. Thank you very much. What we would like to share with you is this is a heavy lift. This is a lot of difficult work, and I cannot laud all of the people in the district that have been part of this and the learning and the growing and the challenges. It's been a challenge to synthesize all of the input from departments and offices to a single district perspective. So part of what we have also done is through this collaboration, it has been highly illuminating as we learn about each other, from each other, and as we learn things about the district from these many voices. One of the key things I want to share as we close out the evening is one of our members said that this process is reassuring as we see everyone from our diverse jobs across the district is doing their work for one purpose, the students. Thank you for your participation tonight. Any additional feedback, please go through Office of Board Governance. They will get it to us. But thank you for your insights, and we look forward to talking more about strategic planning in the future.
I'll say thank you.
Thank you
board
all.
member. Go ahead. Yes.
I
Mr.
just
Chair,
wanted to say thank.
I'm sorry, before we finish, is there information on the timeline that Dr. Mel wanted to share, or did we cover that?
We covered that, Dr. Mann, and it is one of the attachments. So please go and look at that. And then I'm turning it to Dr. Bosley to close out from our side.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say again, thank you. This has been very valuable for us as we move forward with the next steps in the plan. Thank you.
And I also wanted to thank
Good night.
board members for coming and the administration for doing the work, the hard work that you've done thus far. So forward.
Thank you all.
Good night.